Welcome to Matter of Action. I'm Wayne Morrow, and along with me today is Christian Gomez. And today's topic is the USMCA. This has been recent developments, and I've asked Christian to give us an update, who's been watching this, and we've been talking about this for a while, and a lot of interesting things happened even this week. So I think it's important to kind of give us an update, what's happening, and people ought to hear this because time is running out, huh?
That's right. A lot's happened in the last 30 days, including even this week. So since you were last hosting this program, the Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats had a press conference at Capitol Hill where they announced new revised changes to the USMCA. Mm-hmm. And right as they were having that press conference, simultaneously, you had the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, you had USTR, Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and the Mexican trade negotiator Jesus Said, along with the Mexican president Lopez Obrador, signing those changes at the same exact time in Mexico City. So here you are. These are the new changes to the USMCA. And as we're talking, Pelosi's bragging about what these changes are. They're being signed right now.
Of course.
And then on December 19th, just before the House left for the winter Christmas break recess, they passed it in the House, 385 votes to 41 votes opposed. And of those 41 votes that were opposed, only had two Republicans, Massey and Yoho, and one Libertarian or Independent, Justin Amash. Of course, now in January 2020, the Senate is now they have the USMCA and they're looking to pass it. And just yesterday, which for us was Tuesday, on Tuesday, the Senate Finance Committee, chaired by Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, they passed it out of committee there, and they had it passed 25 to 3. So you had many Democrats who typically oppose free trade deals, they supported it this time because of all the extra progressive goodies for labor and environment that was added to this agreement, making it much worse than what it already was.
Yeah. So can you highlight then some of the changes that they made, the Pelosi gang, I could call them, as that were modify that agreement?
Yeah, so the changes that they made, they called it the Protocol of Amendment to the USMCA. That's what was signed. And those changes were sprinkled eventually throughout the text of the USMCA, bringing the USMCA to 2,410 pages now in total. Of those changes, like the Democrats were saying, a lot of it includes stronger enforcement mechanisms for the collective bargaining that was already agreed to in the USMCA, geared more towards Mexico initially. So they want to enforce, make sure that Mexico abides by collective bargaining on a national scale, which is kind of not a very conservative thing to do, to force a whole country to have collective bargaining.
How are they going to do that, Christian?
Well, Mexico passed a labor reform law as a prerequisite for the Democrats to even consider the USMCA. So they sort of forced Mexico's government's hand on that. Although the Mexican government is pretty socialistic in their Congress already anyway. So that was one thing. Other aspects that they included were changes to the environmental chapter 24, and the changes include adding 7 new multilateral environmental agreements. So the original wording to the environment chapter, it mentioned the unconstitutional and unratified Law of the Sea Treaty, and it mentioned a few other biological diversity conventions here and there sprinkled throughout that deal with sustainable development. But now they've included 7 additional environmental agreements that the U.S. and the United Nations have passed in decades prior. And one of the Democratic congresswomen who was in charge in the House committee to get these changes negotiated in, she said from the floor of the House, I think it was Congresswoman Bonamici, if I recall correctly, she's from Oregon. She said that they also included a clause in the environment chapter that allows for the addition of future environmental and conservation agreements to be added to the USMCA. So, for example, one of the things that the Democrats wanted to add was the Paris Accord. The Republicans in the House committee, House Ways and Means Committee, said that they stopped adding that part to the USMCA. because the Democrats wanted that in there. Right. However, the clause that Bonamici and the Democrats put in allows for maybe a future U.S. president to say, you know what, we are going to do the Paris Accord, and we're going to interject it in USMCA.
So they left the door open here.
Yeah, which makes the USMCA, as we've said before, a living agreement. This is as much an environmental accord as it is an integration and supposed trade agreement as well.
Yeah. Wow. What are the things other than environment, as one of them? You gave me a labor. What are the things that you think that really highlights, that really flipped the momentum towards the USMCA? Even though the Birch Society has been totally against and showing that we lose our sovereignty, it's totally unconstitutional. What are the things that really, from the other side, really pushed it along a lot faster?
By the other side, do you mean the Democrats?
Exactly.
Well, that was primarily it. It was primarily the enforcement, labor provisions, and the environmental changes. That was really what got them, for the most part. They also made some changes to like pharmaceutical in terms of patents. But those were some of the main changes that really got them on board, because 385 voting in favor, almost the entire Democratic caucus. I mean, not all the Democrats. I mean, there was about 30-something odd that didn't vote for it, but most voting for it. And in the Senate, we have Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, a pretty liberal U.S. senator. She's announced just this morning or yesterday that she's going to vote for it, along with the other Democrats in the Senate that already voted for it in the committee.
Yeah. So maybe just as a recap and a summary for some of the people who are not familiar with the USMCA, maybe you just want to recap as we're getting close for votes. If it passes, what does that really mean for a U.S. citizen or for America?
Yeah, so the USMCA is depicted as being this better trade deal that's going to replace NAFTA and undo all the ills that NAFTA has done. And we can all agree that NAFTA has been terrible. But is the USMCA the solution to that? I would say no, because when you look at the USMCA, as I've examined and looked through it for over a year, and other experts have looked at it too, and they've said as well, which is what I've seen, that the USMCA is primarily the same old NAFTA. In fact, Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, she said in her remarks in Mexico City on December 10th when they signed the Protocol of Amendment, she said that this agreement not only preserves NAFTA, but then builds on it by adding to the environment and labor. So this preserves NAFTA. It doesn't get rid of it. This keeps the old NAFTA in place, and it adds a lot of the TPP provisions. Yeah,
that's what I hear. And it's just like adding, but matter of fact, there's exact wordings of TPP in this document, word for word, isn't there?
Exactly. What Michael Froman, who was the U.S. trade representative for the Barack Obama administration, who negotiated the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a lot of the same, because Mexico and Canada and the U.S. were part of those negotiations. So the U.S. and Canada and Mexico already agreed to a lot. Basically, what they did to update NAFTA was take what Froman and the Obama administration had already agreed with the Mexican and Canadian governments and slap that on NAFTA and say, here's the new NAFTA, USMCA. It's honestly NAFTA plus TPP. And why is that bad? Because some people might say, well, what's bad about that? More trade access to the Canadian dairy market for our U.S. farmers and cheesemakers. Sure, there's some good aspects there, but that is overshadowed by the fact when you realize that the USMCA is much more than just a trade agreement. It's much more than an environmental agreement, like I mentioned earlier, which doesn't really belong in a trade agreement. This is about integrating the continent towards a North American Union, which we saw started with NAFTA. Basically, what the European Union is, it took them over 50 years to get from where they are today, from where they first started as a simple trade agreement among 6 nations.
Back in the common market days.
Exactly. And now the USMCA, it builds on NAFTA, integrates the economic and environmental and even labor provisions of all 3 countries, U.S., Mexico, and Canada, to move us in the direction of harmony towards having a North American bloc. It's not about making America a stronger economy or Canada's economy stronger or Mexico's individually. It's about uniting them into one solid North American entity. And where do we go from there? A North American Union.
As you talked about passive integration. Wow, this is interesting. So just want to remind everyone, the limited time we have to contact your senators by Twitter, email, phone calls works well. Thank you, Christian. Absolutely. And in the meantime, keep on birching. But this is really important to contact your congressmen, your senators, rather, as soon as possible. And for more information, call JBS, jbs.org or 800-JBS-USA-1. And you can get more information on what we just talked about on our website. Thank you, Christian,
Thank you.
and we'll keep on fighting, huh?